Still seeing a lot of ads where it's like, I don't know in the first 5 seconds what the product is. Don't just show me a table or a landscape. Nobody is making it to that point of the ad. If your product isn't shown in an appealing way in that first 3 seconds, why do you expect someone to want to purchase it? There's like gold in the video, but it's buried at the 15-second mark. Like, nobody's seeing that. I watched like 3 seconds of a TikTok and I feel like I have the attention span of Albert Einstein. So if you have something juicy and something really good, just put it forward in the video as the attention capture and then get to the review or whatever you want to do that's a little bit boring after that. You can sometimes scale ads with the gold buried, but it's a little spooky when it's way back on the back end.
It's all killer, no filler. I'm Eric, and I'm here with our meta and creative team Brain Trust. We've got Aves, fresh off her C-suite performance. We've got social media whiz Taylor Cain. If you're not following Pilot House's Twitter account, you're missing Taylor's daily insights into ad buying. And we've got returning superstar in the making, Grayson. Grayson, what's your actual title now?
Head of Socials is the official title.
Head of Socials. There you go. So literally the Socials Brain Trust. So congrats on that promotion if I didn't talk to you about it already. Was it you, Grayson, that pitched the concept of today's All Killer No Filler podcast to be based around spooky mistakes you see made with ads all the time?
I think it was Aves. She was wanting to get real festive with it.
Okay.
I think we were together auditing a couple accounts that looked very spooky. So a lot of the inspiration just comes from stuff that we've been, coming across our desk and seeing. So
very cool. Well, we've got 3 stages of spooky. It sounds like spooky, spooky, or spookiest. I'm really creative naming conventions here, guys. Mortally terrifying maybe is the last one. We'll go with like mortally terrifying, like slightly alarming, and maybe spooky's like the middle category. But what are some mildly spooky things that we see with ads in some client accounts when they come in?
Yeah, I think for a little spooky or like the mildly spooky stuff, these actually might be the spookiest depending on how you look at it, because these are kind of like the things that are like what we consider like fundamentals, I guess, as far as like just having your bases covered. So those are like easy things that you can probably, if you were to evaluate your own ad account, you might see some stuff that you could just instantly change and see better performance. But yeah, I wanted to start with like the easy stuff first, and then the deeply spooky stuff would be like stuff you have to really dig in and like think about. I think the first thing we had for a little spooky was like just misuse of like ad copy space and headline space. And this is like something especially like 4 or 5 years ago that like would actually really change performance, and like simply altering ad copy and headline spacing could actually just like make an ad go from like a complete loser ad to something that actually wins. Nowadays, it's more like the creative and stuff like that, but it's still like super important. I feel like because it isn't like a main driver anymore, people have like, I don't know, gone lazy or just forgotten about it or not bothered. But this would be like the spacing of like when you create an ad, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen in Ads Manager, like the preview for it. And so often, you'll like write out ad copy in like a doc next to what you're building, then copy and paste it in. But when you copy and paste it in, all the spacing's wrong. So it'll be like one sentence on the top of your ad and then like a new paragraph line and like 3 words of that new paragraph. And it's like completely disjointed. And it's like the first impression of your brand is just this like nonsensical sentence that doesn't really like help people like trail in or learn from your brand.
Taylor, like you and I last year on a brand that we work with, like, didn't we do a copy test? Because we were, even as people who do this like day in, day out, under that assumption that Grayson was just pointing out, it was like, oh, like creative is what's driving now. Like so much of Meta is automated. Like we're pumping out all these concepts, but we did do like a pretty isolated copy test, which challenged that and then found that the ad copy made a huge difference. Like we had the control of being the creative and tried different variations. And now it's like part of our workflow pretty regularly to test, because it does like still make a difference. Like, don't get me wrong, the creative person, like creative is still very important, and that needs to be dialed before you see the changes in performance when you make those like copy adjustments. But yeah, I don't know, Taylor, if you remember when we were both just like, oh, we've been letting this fall to the wayside, the ad copy.
Yeah, we did find that it made a pretty big difference, and we went back based on that and basically added in a layer to our workflow, because part of, like, I really enjoy creative testing well, isolating for the creative as the variable when I'm doing a lot of creative testing, but then I want to go back and just see how I can keep improving. And there's case by case, right, where you want to customize the creative to, or customize the copy to the creative that you're building out. But yeah, I mean, like a big example I think that's valuable to think on is now that we're in Q4, like leveraging that headline space, and then, as Grayson mentioned, using the space strategically so you can potentially draw attention with the headline and then use the description underneath to call something else out, whether it's like how your brand is handling shipping or trust increase type things. Like there's so many things you might already be doing or you might not be doing, and it's a way to potentially level up the performance of your ads, but with a pretty quick change there.
I like that idea of like, so where the hook lives in meta ads right now in a way. And so what you're suggesting is it's sort of like you set up the hook with your headline and then make good on it kind of in the ad copy space. I remember when I was writing a lot of ads, like having a sort of like attention grabbing like first line or first couple lines and really understanding where the text cuts off and kind of using a compelling, maybe like a 3 dot that leads into someone wanting to read more. Like what are some other like best practices right now about where your how to structure your hooks within your ad text?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one, right? Like if you're going to have content under the see more, then you want to like get people to see more and engage with it. So I'd say that still holds true. Like a lot of the same old, like people typically see headline first and then they'll go up to the creative and the copy and engage that way. So you can kind of think about it like, I think probably way back when in one of these podcast episodes I mentioned, or one of us mentioned the idea of like taking a step back and going and looking at your own ads, or just going into ad library, looking at a brand you like and saying like, hey, what do I notice first between all the ads, and is it the same on every ad? Tried it a few different times, maybe get multiple perspectives so you're not biasing the info. But even just doing that exercise can help so much in understanding that. And yeah, one thing we did, I know Avery and I noticed from one of the recent like promo pushes we made for a brand that we're working on together, was that by reinforcing some of the components in the creative in the headline, that ended up making a big difference. So like one of the real like exciting or deep reason that someone would take action, it lived in the creative, but it was one of multiple things. We reinforced it in the headline, and that drove really, really strong performance. So there's ways to be strategic with it, but yeah, most of the best practices still hold true.
And what are we putting in the headline most? I know we test all the time, but if we're running a promo offer, the promo goes in the headline almost always. Like Grayson or Aves, what are you guys putting in the headlines most often that works?
I think I've said this before on this podcast. Really unhinged emojis, which I've seen Taylor do himself with like either that promo. So it's like you could come at it from like a you won't believe how good this deal is, or another good headline is like exclusive access, just look below kind of thing. Like you have to see more to unveil what the actual promo is, works pretty well. Or similar to what Taylor said, it's like really drilling in and understanding exactly why an ad works. So if it's like a 15-second spot, maybe the most meaningful thing, my make-believe mug company, the most meaningful thing is this mug keeps my coffee hot. So it's like once you've done the work to figure that out, then you're heading in with a headline that's like, are you sick and tired of cold coffee? Because as Taylor mentioned, it kind of like reiterates that. And then I also find this time of year, it's like the like promise of a promo, but being a bit more benefit focused tends to work in that headline space, because everyone and their mom gets like 9,000 Temu ads a day. So if I wanted to get a 99-cent coffee cup, I could do it anywhere. But really focusing on marrying like the benefit and the sneaky promo in the headline, just to like spike the right kind of interest on platform.
It's like the first thing that people see, right, is the headline. This is kind of going into the moderately spooky stuff, talking about, what people act like, the journey of what people see first. Like we've heard from Meta, they've done studies that people see the headline first, then the creative, then read the text. And so thinking in the same way as like in retention, on probably the retention podcast with Jordan that you have, Eric, it's like the same thing as like the email like headline. We think of it the same way. It's like what's going to capture their attention and stop the scroll. Another great thing is like speaking to the niche. So if there are trending things, topical things for that niche, that you know about. So this is like doing research into your competitors, etc. As an example, it would be like if you're hitting a retargeting audience that you know is like in consideration for that product, see what their ads are showing or what their organic is showing, and then speak to that. So it'd be like, we know you've been looking at all these other terrible products or whatever it is, or like, we know you've been looking at other products that don't do this. And that's like your differentiator, right? And it's like trying to find ways to speak to that audience. And you can do that, not even just retargeting, you could do that just like, again, like knowing the trend or knowing what else is on their feed and trying to speak to that and match that up.
What's the most unhinged emoji? Back to the unhinged emojis. It reminds me of this blog post that maybe I'll link in this that I found a while ago. It was written in like 2015, but it's this like big write-up on the newest, most cryptic and esoteric emojis. And it's got like the Parthenon, it's got the scorpion, it's got like, it's like the black flag is the sign of the anarchist. The crossed swords are a paradox, in one breath signifying a staid union and another illustrating a clash or duel. So there's some deep emoji psychology going in here. What's your favorite unhinged emoji, Aves?
Oh, in my personal life, I love that little red monster face. That is, yeah.
It's a demon. It's like a Japanese demon. Sweet.
Love her. Such a diva. I feel like it just like throws people off. I try to do that a lot too, where it's like, if you saw that emoji associated with like that product, it's just kind of weird and feels like almost ill-fitting. And I feel like that's fun to experiment with too. Like, how would someone, not the brand, but how would just a human being like use emojis to describe this vertical? And I feel like that does a good job of like stopping the scroll a little bit, because like you wouldn't, not that I'm throwing that red diva on every like ad that we make. We don't do that, just to be clear, but we do try to use like emojis and ads that like actual human beings, kind of what Grayson was mentioning, who like are within that audience would use to describe either like the issue or the benefit. It's a whole language. It's like hieroglyphics.
And there's some really weird ones. Like, what is that businessman with sunglasses like floating? Like, what is that guy about? It's the most esoteric emoji according to this blog post, but we'll have to do another podcast all on esoteric emojis. But for now, are there any just mildly we have a couple other notes just in this mildly spooky section. What else would we say about just mildly spooky ad problems?
Yeah, I feel like one I gotta say is the nothing in the hook. This is kind of, again, branching into two, and I talk about this a lot on this podcast, but we're still getting honest, and I'm still seeing a lot of ads where it's like, I don't know in the first 5 seconds what the product is. Don't just show me a like table or a landscape. Nobody is making it to that point of the ad, most likely. Like, most people won't be watching past that 3-second mark. So if your product isn't shown in an appealing way in that first 3 seconds, why do you expect someone to want to purchase it? If it's just like, yeah, a coffee table or a couch, like you don't get to the exciting stuff. So definitely something that's a little spooky is when there's like gold in the video, but it's buried at the 15-second mark. Like, nobody's seeing that. I watched like 3 seconds of a TikTok and I feel like I have the attention span of Albert Einstein. Like, nobody's getting past 5 seconds. So if you have something juicy and something really good, just put it forward in the video as the attention capture, and then get to the review or whatever you want to do that's a little bit boring after that. But that one's definitely like, you can sometimes scale ads with the gold buried, but it's a little spooky when it's way back on the back end.
Nice. We've got a note here about creatives that are too busy or no clear focus, but I think that leads into the middle category maybe of spooky issues with ads, which is just no general alignment or no focus. Who wants to elaborate on this mid-tier of spooky mistakes?
Yeah, I think like when you think about the opportunity that's in front of you to wrap it all together and drive an action, for me, like, there are times where, interestingly, like less alignment versus more alignment between headline, ad copy, and creative, like your 3 kind of major control points within the ad. Sometimes you can create that like wow factor by like hitting people with different points that might feel a little bit disjointed. So there's always merit in testing these types of things. It's interesting, but I think at the same time, like having a clear direction with where you want to go and what you want the outcome to be, like building ads out, and I'm preparing the copy, preparing the headline, working with the creative that we've planned. I also want to think about like what that overall outcome is going to be and what someone's going to take away from this ad as I'm prepping it. So I think more than anything, like that's why this kind of lands in the middle. There's an element of like value from sometimes being a little bit disjointed and throwing things in that might surprise someone or wow them with a fact. But you also want to make sure you do have a clear why at the end of this ad that someone would want to take action with it. On the other flip side of that.
I think too, it obviously performs better when you can clearly distill a reason to click through from a user point of view, from a traffic point of view. But if you think about yourself as a marketer too, if you can't distill like why an ad is working, you're just continuing to like throw heaps of spaghetti at the wall. But this is also kind of a win-win scenario where when you can then, as Taylor was saying, create this like perfect environment of alignment and we know what it is that's causing the click through, we can then double down on that and like really push into it and really kind of like focus on that. What are different ways to show that? How many different ads can we make that explain that with different visuals? How do we explain that to someone who's, you know, a cold prospecting piece of traffic versus someone who's down the funnel? Like, how does the experience kind of change? So it's one of those things that like not only will drive performance and makes it easier for someone to click through on an ad when they can look at the coffee cup and say it keeps my coffee hot, but it also then allows you as a marketer to be like, this is what's working about the product. Can I then make other products that share this benefit? Can I make more ads that share this benefit? Like, it's so insightful when you yourself know what is working.
Yeah, like the ad copy is like a founder's intro, and then like the creative is a sales static, and the headline's like free shipping. And it's like, we have no idea what to take away from this. It's like,
Jesus, take the wheel, pretty much. Yeah, it's also one thing that I remember from a talk at the first ever event that I put on was just remembering what the job of the ad is. Like, you know, you have either you're sending to your website or you're sending to a custom landing page, ideally, that really does the sell job. You really need to, you know, pique interest, but the job of the ad is to get a click to go through to the website. So I think you can probably run into ads sometimes that are trying to do too much education or not enough like interest piquing, where the real mission is to get them off that site and onto yours.
Yeah, I think I've like described it this way on the pod before, but it's like the ad should function as a sign on a store door that says there's like really cool shit in here. Come in, there's really, really cool stuff, but you don't, obviously, you wouldn't say everything as it was. You want to like keep some suspense, and then you can think about the like going inside and the brick and mortar like shopping experience as like a landing page. Like that's something we talk about a lot, but the ad itself shouldn't do more than that, like there's really cool shit in here type of moment.
We've got a note here about some T crossing and I dotting in this spooky section when brands come in and they're not taking advantage of both square and vertical versions of ads. Is that, do you see that often? Are people often not providing the exact right dimensions for all their creatives, or is that sort of infrequent?
Yeah, we see it a lot. And there's a lot of like, because something that like is no secret sauce, like a lot of video format that's short form and maybe built natively on TikTok works really well. And one thing that makes me irate, to be honest, is people putting that same content into a like square setting and 75% of the copy is just gone. You can't tell what the ad is saying anymore. Sometimes it's like cropped really whack to like you can't actually see the product or the creator. So that's a really common one just because that type of content works so well, and you can like mass produce things. Like I've done it in TikTok very quickly, and then people will just upload that straight into like Meta Ads Manager, and it looks awful. It gives me a headache.
And then something to add to that from the technical side that makes me irate in that vein is the fact that in the UI in Meta, when you choose to use a post ID, if you take the post ID and you place it in, and now you can customize your vertical placements over top of the post ID for your square or your feed placement. If you customize the creative over top of the post ID, because the post ID pulls in the feed placement, then it looks like social proof disappeared in your headline reset in the ad preview. But then if you publish and preview, like open the preview of the ad in Facebook, you'll notice that it's still there, even with that custom overlay on top. So that's one thing that makes me a little bit irate, is that that's still not as obvious as it should be in the platform. But you can use post IDs and still leverage the power of vertical placements on top of it for anybody who's wondering that. Just try it out for yourself.
Nice. What do we say about calls to action? Because you've, in most cases on Meta, you've got the button that you're picking, like, get offer or buy now or whatever. You've got that call to action, but there are also multiple other places to have very clear calls to action. I remember we also, in one of the very first podcasts, Taylor used to advocate putting a link, like an actual, hyperlinked link in the ad copy. Is that something we're still doing? What do we say about CTAs now?
I think it's maybe less like trendy compared to what it was at the time. Like I'd say not necessarily as common, but I would say there's still, like, when it comes to CTA testing, massively valuable. There's sometimes a difference between like shop now and get offer when you're running a promo ad, or learn more depending on where someone's being redirected to after. So it's another pivot that we include in naming conventions, test process. But yeah, I think still, like, it's worth thinking about in that holistic view of what's someone coming away with from this ad and what's the intended outcome of this ad at this point in the funnel.
Yeah, I think something to think about too is the type of offering, because we obviously work with a lot of DTC, like you're selling something. So I'm going to come away with a purchase and a thing, but we also work with a lot of like lead generation or maybe like experience-based brands. And those CTAs, like, this is another pet peeve of mine, like shop now or get offer is just not as impactful. If you have a lead form on the other side of that button, it's really important. And like you can see in the data that if you preempt that, if you say the CTA changes from get offer to take our 2-minute quiz, when people understand what's like required of them on the other side of the click, they're way more likely to click than if they're just anticipating it might be a lot of work, or you're just not really sure what's going on. The other thing you set yourself up for, if you're not a straight up like product-based brand, is like sharp drop-offs as well. If you're not clear in your CTA about like what is the actual action you're calling people to do on the other side, can feel like not that important, and it feels like maybe it should be more exciting, like I was saying, like get offer or save now, something like that. But you truly see more performance when you're really preempting the experience on the other side of the click, whatever it is.
Yeah, or if it's like a top of funnel ad, like what we were talking about earlier, right? Where it's like, if the intended outcome of the ad isn't necessarily, it's like the introduction to your brand, then it might be okay to be collecting emails and getting people on your email list. Obviously, then you're just like setting up a clear segment of those people so that you can track performance over time. But yeah, have the CTA be that upper level objective, and then just like qualify that over time and make sure that people are actually converting.
And don't ever overestimate people's intelligence about telling them what to do on a page or in something. I think you can be as explicit as you need to be to get them to do what you want them to do, which is advertising. Super cool. So I think that brings us to our mortally terrifying or deeply spooky section, when we just open up an account and we see some really spooky things. What are we looking at?
One really spooky thing that happened recently with me and Aves was like, we get this all the time where people get really deep into their brains and obviously like, micromanaging things and like, try to min-max and do all that stuff, which is great. And we do that too. But when we audit accounts, we also take like a step back and like that new perspective of like, how does everything look? And oftentimes, especially with brands that are really, really trying to build like a brand, like consistency and message, when you actually zoom out, it's like all their ads, if you were to lay out their ads on a table, like playing cards, it's like they all just kind of look the same. And just imagine you're like spending money on like retargeting and hitting people over time. And you're just kind of like, because again, people are scrolling by, right? And it's like, imagine they're kind of just seeing the same thing over and over and you're getting the same outcome. I think that's like the definition of insanity. And
it doesn't hit, right? It's probably not. It's something that the brand owners think about. If it's not working, it's because it's something that maybe the brand owners or the brand thinks about itself, but it's not like flipped it to really figure out what your customers care about in a way, right?
Yeah. I think when you understand, like, a way to put this through like a brand lens is, in the case that Grayson's referring to, it's like the brand understood its core brand message, but the issue that I see a lot of, especially like larger accounts that we audit or like more established businesses, the issue comes down to like they have this really well fleshed out brand, but they have no idea how to distill that into a bunch of different ways of saying something similar that's based around the same thing. So it's like once you understand that, that's great, but that can't be the only point that you're hitting all the time, because it's not going to hit someone top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. It's not going to hit the same on Pinterest as it does on TikTok. Like every audience is so different. So you have to account for that and account for like, okay, this is the very boring elevator pitch of the brand, but how do I still represent that in like highly entertaining ways that hit across funnels, but also across platforms?
And avatars potentially as well, right? Where you're actually, if you know who avatars are, if you're doing some form of avatar testing, you want to take that central brand message and put it into either the language or, you know, some sort of creative context that will really speak to that avatar.
Totally. Yeah. And you'll find too, like those different avatars and personas, like a different cohort will have a different set of values. So like cup example, it might be really important for Grayson for his coffee to stay hotter longer, but for me, it might be really important that the mug itself is durable, because I'm just like part of a clumsy cohort. I don't know. But it's like people have different reasons, right? That they'll respond to your brand. So if our brand is just like really high quality cups, then distilling that down to, like you were saying, the different personas, and then also like we could go deep, but the understanding of like what personas are where is really important too. Because like some things will have a higher hit rate on Meta when you distill that brand down versus on Reddit or wherever you're running ads. You know, everything's going to be a little bit different. So when it all looks the same, it is big time scary. Friday the 13th.
When it's all sound and fury but signifies nothing, it's bad news. That sounds really dramatic. Okay, cool. What's our next point here? We got a lack of coordination between creatives and post-click experience.
I mean, it could be as dramatic as like Aves, we were saying, where it's like, check out this quiz, and then you actually just send them to the homepage and you expect them to go and find the quiz like somewhere on the site. That would be like a really scary, insulting version. But it could also just be like, you know, you're really hitting home or kind of leading in with the hook of like, you know, here's this value proposition. And then again, you just send them to the product page where, yes, that value proposition is kind of like buried in like the info, or it's like one of the 4 bullet points on your product page or pre-sale. But it's not really like an in-depth, you know, continuation of like what got them hooked. And so if you're getting someone hooked on a specific angle, if it's that durability for when Aves is smashing her mugs in the ground or whatever, you know, we should probably send to a custom TVP that really goes in depth about that durability and explains that more. Because like they're clicking for a reason. It's because you actually hooked them. So you got like half the battle done. Use that opportunity to like continue on and really hit that home.
Yeah, it's worse than leaving money on the table. It's like burning money to not consider your post-click as important as your pre-click, because just as Grayson said, like if I click on an ad that's about durability and I get to one that's about like temperature, it's so disjointed, and it's like, you know, as an advertiser why they clicked on that ad, because hopefully you've done the work and you've distilled it. There's one benefit. So you have that information, and not doing anything with it is so spooky. It's very scary.
Especially when you like educate halfway through and then all of a sudden they're Googling other mugs right on Google, and they're finding now they're getting hit with ads from your competitors that are actually doing it properly. That's deep spook right there.
Deep Max spookiness. Would you say, Taylor, that the post-click experience is still probably the most appreciated aspect of this process?
I would say so, yeah. Like just even knowing like what on average someone needs, depending on the persona, depending on where they are in the journey, like what content is actually going to like thrive to convert that journey once they've engaged with the ad in a way that like resonates all that messaging. It's just so massive, right? Because like you can always spend more on the platform to try to scale, but it's going to be a lot easier to focus on building a foundation of higher conversion rate, higher AOV, like whatever those components are, and then doing the legwork and testing to understand. I tested maybe homepage versus collection page, and now I understand. I saw this pattern. Here's this hypothesis. Here's the next test. I tried this PDP versus like shoppable lander with multiple products. Here's what I learned from that. Like then getting into the nitty gritty, like we've had experiences where we've used like heat map tools to find notable differences that can change the trajectory of an entire product advertising funnel for brands. So I think, yeah, like the road mapping process that may seem daunting at first, but really isn't that daunting if you break it up. That can go such a long way and is still pretty underserved, at least in a lot of the conversations that happen around e-com and D2C.
Very cool. We've got a note here, and I just want to know, ads are more vanilla than ice cream. Is this the same as the top point, or are we really looking for ads that are going to match my freak?
I think with this point, it's kind of like an extension of the top point. With this one, you can kind of think of it as like, sometimes if like all your creatives look the same for your brand as a whole, like you might just end up going after one like audience segment or like delivering in one pattern. This also is like an extension of that. It's the idea that like, how do your ads stack up to what is exciting to your demographic on a broad scale? Like, are they actually interesting? And where we use the word vanilla was one term that one of our founders, Kyle Hitchcock's, he instilled in me early in my Pilot House career, and it's stuck with me many years later. And I still think about that whenever I'm prepping any ad. Take a step back. Does this ad look in any way boring or like there's a lack of excitement or interest likely to happen from the persona that I'm designing it for?
Love it. Sizzle. When we're talking about headlines on the newsletter or specific things that we really want people's eyeballs on, we're trying to figure out how to get sizzle into every aspect of what we're doing.
Get weird. It always comes back to get weird.
Use unhinged emojis. Anything not to be vanilla. Sweet. So a lot of what we're talking about here is funnel continuity. And so another point we have here is when you're retargeting ads have hooks that are actually just brand introduction. So again, it's just not treating your customer where they're at. What are best practices for retargeting ads to not make them so spooky?
Yeah, I think the big thing there that always spooks me out is you have like an intro, like a brand intro ad where it's like either the founder or maybe you're just like, getting someone to introduce the brand for the first time, and it really works. And so you're like, oh, it's a winning ad. We'll just dupe this everywhere and run it. It's like very disjointed, and usually those flop because like imagine like the hook, the reason it's working is because it's an introduction, like you're pulling them in with that introduction, but now they already know who you are. And so it's like, think of other brands that are established, like Coca-Cola or whatever. You don't really see big brands an ad on YouTube or TV or whatever. And it's like, we're Coca-Cola and here's what we're about. Like, you know what it is. It'd be really weird and like out of place. Usually they're trying to tell you about like a new product or like a new thing that they've done, unless they're rebranding. So it's just like a bad hook. It's just like, you've already introduced yourself. Now is your chance to introduce a new element or hit again on part of what hooked them in and go deeper, like we already talked about.
Yeah, try to think about like what is the like remaining point of friction between person and conversion in retargeting, because they're already like hopefully primed and ready to buy. So is it price? Is it like a special offer? Is it, I think Taylor mentioned this in ad copy, but do you guys have really easy like shipping and return policies? Like how do you just remove that final barrier to purchase? And it is usually something like social proof, price, or shipping, kind of trust stuff. That's just that one thing that'll get someone over the line. Like they've been looking at it for a while. What is that final kind of piece of the puzzle that they need to see? Because if you think about it too, like on the inverse, really spooky to have like maybe a Facebook exclusive offer as you introduce the brand. Like you flip it, like that sounds insane to lead with, instead of like introducing yourself to be like, we offer free shipping. It's like, great, I don't even know what is being shipped to me for free and why I would want it. So thinking like all that stuff, you kind of save that juice for that like last touch point to drive the conversion home.
What about post-click with retargeting ads? I know we're always testing, but are we seeing trends where we're getting to either more specific product-focused landing pages or PDPs that we're sending to effectively in retargeting, or is it still going to broader websites?
Yeah, it's typically like PDPs and stuff.
Yeah, it's like once you get down to that point, sometimes I think like on brands where things are really segmented, like heavy social proof, like adding a ton of CGC and reviews to like a landing page can really help with that step of the funnel too, where it's like you're kind of looking for a reason not to buy something. So you're accounting for like building that trust, because there's a ton of sketchy internet products. So I find like real person social proof is really helpful to add to a page when you are running retargeting traffic to it.
Also, like building custom, like especially in Q4 years, like Avery was saying, looking for that reason to purchase, like custom gifting, pre-sales, and product pages. So it's like, they've been considering for a while. You have this pool that you built up over time. And it's like, here's the reason. It's because like there's a custom like gift bundle, or like here's why it's like a great gift. And it's a whole custom page on that.
Yeah, and like I was just gonna add to that, like thinking about your excitement pillars and like what I didn't know type things. Like if maybe you show them a prospecting ad for a product that is at risk of selling out, like you could show them a retargeting ad that like shares some of the insight about like what the most popular, like you could show them a retargeting ad, land them on somewhere with like best selling styles that, are at risk of selling out or anything like that too. Like there's different ways of thinking about it that way as well. And then A/B testing your way through it.
This podcast is turning into a long one, but I'm curious where we're at right now with retargeting in terms of segmenting retargeting campaigns into their own campaigns. I remember there was maybe some debate a little while ago. Some people were advocating Facebook's so smart that you can just put everything in one campaign and they'll know what's retargeting and what's not. I assume that's not the case. I assume we are breaking out retargeting campaigns separate from other mid and top funnel campaigns.
Yeah, here's where my love of it depends advertising comes in. I'd say both of those are like partially true. I still like our accounts. A lot of them are still running segmented retargeting campaigns. What we've done in a lot of cases is we've gone to like topic based structuring, or more audience controls based. So again, like historic stuff, like your time series windows and stuff. The big thing I will say that's really valuable is now with Meta's audience segment breakdowns and the fact that they're increasing transparency around that type of stuff. And you can define it at the account level, because if you're an account using a lot of Advantage Plus shopping, naturally that'll target your engaged audience, which in a lot of cases is defined as website visitors. So you want to know what your frequency and your performance is overall, as well as what it looks like in anything you're doing that's more segmented, if you're in that kind of a scenario. But yeah, there's still a place for it in the current meta environment.
Nice. And our final point here, one of the spookiest things we see. Did you mention this one earlier, Taylor, or is this a new one?
Oh, I think this one's mine. It's like very unrelated, but I do see it sometimes. So something we run a lot of at Palo House and work really well, especially if you're if you're in a vertical with like, you just have a lot of variants, like DPA ads work very well most of the time. But something I see people doing is we create a lot of frames for DPA ads. So you can layer these in, they can call out sales. Really great if you have an account that runs a lot of DPAs in general right now, to start thinking about layering in frames. You can add more messaging to them. But sometimes, unfortunately, people just build the frame and don't really consider how it will look over all of their images that are imported from Shopify. So I see like products being covered up, or text being like you cannot see it. It's like white text over a white product image. So really considering what your images look like in your DPAs, and then building the frames based off of those. That one's really spooky, and I feel like I see it more times than I want, that things are just kind of cut off or look really jank, or you can't even see it. And it's such a great tool, and it's also a low lift creative effort, which we don't get a lot of.
No.
It's something that's like easy to crank out a bunch of, easy to see performance increase. Like they typically move the needle, but sometimes people really catastrophically fumble the DPA frame ball. So really make sure that you just understand like what your imagery will look like before you create the frames and start testing them.
Yeah, DPAs work so well during Q4. So definitely fix those up.
Get your dynamic product ads cranking. Nice, guys. I think there's a lot of value in this here podcast. Quick shout out, if you're listening, to go right now and search for the world's best email and retention podcast. I've promised to plug it on all podcasts kind of going forward. So we're already up to 100 listeners on it, which is pretty sweet. It's growing faster than D2C did. So really excited for continued growth there. And then we'll have to launch the Meta podcast soon with you guys.
Podcasts for everyone.
Podcasts for all. I think that's the plan. Nice. Well, thanks for coming on today, guys. This was fun. Time went by faster than we thought there. But I had to ask, what is everyone being for Halloween this year? Do people have any costume? I've got a Halloween party in 2 weeks, and I am just scrambling. I had the best Halloween costume ever last year, which was Dr. Evil. And I did the full shave. I had the pinky ring. I had plans of world domination, but I feel like I can't do it 2 years in a row, and I don't really want to shave. Got any good suggestions? What are you guys being?
Man, I'm going as a group costume. So what are we, what is it? Inside Out, that movie. I'm going as like the emotions from Inside Out. So I'm going to be fear as part of like 15 people going as all the emotions. I don't know.
Oh man, that is so good. I might start crying if I see that one too much because it's such an emotional movie. Grayson, you're such a creative guy. What I know you like to go all out with costumes and the spectacle. So what are you thinking of doing this year?
I'm going as David Lynch. I don't know if you've seen Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to David Lynch. He made an appearance in season 2. It was deep cut there.
You're just going to be yelling at everyone? I think I just remember him being super hard of hearing. Was that basically his thing?
Yeah, super hard of hearing. And he's like an FBI agent, so he'll just be yelling at everyone. It'll be fun.
And Aves, what about you?
Really excited. I have Grayson knows these guys, my little Sunny Angels. You can purchase a Sunny Angel like hat and wings, so that's what I'll be doing. I've really caught the fever, the Sunny Angel obsession. I'm into it. So
I like it. I'm looking for a Australian Olympic outfit, and I'll just go as Raygun.
That's amazing.
I might just do Reagan, or I might just do Lebowski. I got the beard. I like White Russians. I might just wear my my sweater and go as low lift Lebowski. So we'll have to see.
That's the perfect fallback costume. When in doubt, you just do the Lebowski, just get a robe.
Yeah, my other one was Shaun of the Dead. I could resurrect my Shaun of the Dead costume, which I wore for many years. That just came on Netflix, so it'll be a little more culturally relevant now. But people love yelling at me, "You've got some red on you," when I'm wearing that. So that was deep cut there. Nice, cool. I'm glad we filmed this addendum. Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
thanks.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilot House's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.